This was the Agnostic Agile Meetup event on the 16th of August with Mark Lyons, who was speaking about working smarter, how to learn, optimize, and accelerate with Disciplined Agile.
All right, thank you for that wonderful introduction. And folks, I'm really pleased to be here today. I think this is the perfect audience, frankly, for Disciplined Agile. We have the same mindset that there's no one way of working, there's no one method or framework to suit all situations. And this is what the Disciplined Agile Toolkit is all about. One of the reasons we joined PMI was specifically because PMI is agnostic, the leader in project management, but really wasn't seen as the leader in Agile. And Gartner has always seen us as sort of one of the top 4 approaches. If you look at their enterprise reports, they'll talk about safe, less, Spotify, which, as most of you probably know, it's not really a framework, but still people reference that as their approach. And then Disciplined Agile. So we're in the 4 that Gartner talks about. But a couple of points on that is it's kind of mixing apples and oranges. We're not a framework. We're not a canned approach. We're a resource full of I recently counted over 1,600 practices, whether it's in planning or estimating or architecture, testing, requirements, different types of life cycles, which I'll go through today. A very useful resource, which you can use to plug into SAFe, plug into Scrum or Lean, Kanban, whatever your XP, whatever your flavor is, because none of those methods or frameworks really cover a lot of the basics that we need to use in addition to what the method or framework talks about. So it's a supplemental resource, it's complementary, it doesn't really compete. That's the first thing I want to say is I'm not here to talk anybody into DA versus something, stop doing SAFe or stop doing Scrum or Spotify to do DA. That's not it at all, because whatever you're currently doing is probably good, but we would suggest that you can always get better. And this is where the toolkit can help you. So it's a good fit for us with PMI and not-for-profit now being able, and PMI has such depth and reach around the world with over 1 million certifications. I think there's about 700,000 members, 300 chapters around the world. So tremendous, and we have we're advisors into PMOs at all the Fortune 500 companies around the world. So. And now all of a sudden they're learning about DA. And this is one of the things that Gartner has always said is that they like Disciplined Agile, but they're not a sales organization. They're a research company. And if you want to talk to them, they will say, you might say, well, we're struggling with SAFe. And they say, well, have you looked at Disciplined Agile? And they go, what's that? So that is our biggest thing holding us back, if you will. The Disciplined Agile was created by Scott Ambler and myself, a little company in Canada. And we had no marketing organization. So we got the word out by speaking at conferences, writing the books and writing the blogs. But now what we're seeing is tremendous uptake in DA because we have that global reach. All right. So one of the things that, we are part of PMI, and a lot of times people will say, well, why would I go to PMI for Agile stuff? Because they're the waterfall people. They're the traditional 50-year-old company. I want to go with a more modern approach. And what this slide is trying to say, folks, is that it's not your fault. There's a commercial that used to be out there that tried to attract the newer generation into Oldsmobiles, but they were seen as old cars for old people. And so this marketing campaign by Oldsmobile was trying to say, hey, take another look. This is not the Oldsmobile that you think it is. And I would say the same thing about PMI. Is maybe take another look, because under the new leadership that we've had within PMI, we've really gone into all what we talk about is change makers. Whether you're a practitioner or a leader, we all need to understand skills around being change makers, change enablers, change agents, if you will. So we have this, great course on wicked problem solving, citizen developer. If you've heard about that, we're not. If you haven't heard about citizen developer, it's this idea that anyone can create apps with the new tools that are out there. But I think we all understand that if everybody is creating apps, there's some dangers involved in that. Security vulnerabilities, technical debt, no reuse strategy and all that kind of stuff. And PMI's role in citizen developer is governance. We're trying to say, hey, if you're going to let your people out in the business teams create their own apps, well, let's have some governance around that to make sure that we do it properly. And that's where PMI has a say. And then disciplined agile, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So I think you folks have relationships with Ari, and we all know about the Agile Manifesto being 20 years old. And I think it's time to reflect on how are we doing, and not as well, I think, as we might have hoped we would be doing. And I think it's logical for CEOs, executives, CIOs to say, are we there yet? I mean, it's been 20 years. Are we agile? We spent all this money on agile training and certifications and consultancies. And I'm not really sure I see a tremendous amount of benefit. So, what's going on? And there's some surveys behind this, some independent research that says we're actually not doing as well as sometimes we say we are. Don Reifer surveyed 1,500 plus teams and 150 organizations. It's an independent survey, and he says that agile methods like Scrum deliver a 7 to 12% productivity improvement, and scaling frameworks 3 to 5%, which I think we can all agree is a bit underwhelming for the investments that we're making. Surely we can do better than that, and yes, we can. So why are we still struggling, and why are we still debating about my method or framework is better than yours? And by the way, I know that you folks understand Ivar Jakobsen's work. I see it on your website in terms of essence. And Scott and I know Ivar very well. We go back many, many years to the days when Scott worked with Rational, didn't work for Rational Software, but I did. I got to know Ivar very well. And we love Ivar's work. It's done at a sort of a different level of abstraction than ours is. His is more granular. Ours is more sort of higher level. But we have the common philosophy that we need to escape the prescription of methods and frameworks, as Ivar says, escape methods prison, so that we can be liberated and use the practices that make sense for us. Very common alignment between Ivar's work and ours. So, from my perspective, it's very easy to understand why we're not doing so well with Agile. People are looking for simple solutions. And you may have seen this quote: for every complex problem, there is an answer that is clear, it's simple, but it's wrong. All right. This stuff is complicated, it's complex. And people try to find an easy answer by buying a framework or a method, declaring themselves a method shop or a Spotify shop, a safe shop or whatever. And that's just not right in my mind, because every organization of any significance is using a variety of approaches, and that's good. They should be using bespoke agile approaches. Some people, maybe there's a place for safe, but I would say in most organizations, most of their projects or initiatives or products are too small to be using safe. So to call yourself a safe shop, it really doesn't make sense to me. But nevertheless, that's what people are doing. So what I wanted to talk about today is this need to customize our way of working, right? And that's what our latest book is called, Choose Your Way of Working. And in my mind, part of the discipline in DA is we need to invest to learn, and only then are we in a position to optimize and then accelerate the delivery of value to customers. And that's what I'm going to talk a bit about today. So one of the things I would say to our Agile profession is we need to raise the bar. And if you're a customer and you're paying for consultancies or people inside your organization delivering using Agile, you deserve better. They should, most of the folks on this call are probably practitioners, but from a customer perspective, if you're doing traditional projects, like you're building a skyscraper in Dubai or a pipeline or something like that, traditional approach probably makes sense. And for that, we expect people to have something like a PMP, a project management professional, which has a requirement for thousands of hours of real world experience, knowledge of an extensive body of knowledge, and passing a very difficult exam. And it's only after that that people will trust you with millions of dollars or pounds to deliver a particular initiative. My question would be, why don't we do that on the Agile side? We don't. Somebody takes a 2-day cert, they maybe have no experience. You give them hundreds of thousands of pounds and things go wrong. In my mind, is there any wonder? They're just simply not qualified And we're doing the business a disservice by trusting people, with these mission critical initiatives without the proper skills and experience. And this is where DA comes in. So the kinds of problems we solve is we believe a typical, not all, of course, typical agile teams are inadequately skilled to truly optimize their ways of working. They just don't know what their options are. They haven't invested in the education. As Owen said in the intro, I've been doing this for a long, long time. And back in the day when I was younger, we read a lot of books. I know the UML, the Unified Modeling Languages. I've got many different things in my toolkit to help do visual modeling of the problem domain and potential solutions. People don't learn that stuff anymore. And it's kind of sad from my perspective. So we need to invest more in learning. And then teams and organizations are often locked into methods and frameworks and no longer improving, not sure how to get better. And I think you agree with me in that when I look at your principles. And organizations, our ability to deliver value to customers is often impeded by ineffective value streams. And if you're not familiar with value streams, I would encourage you to learn more about them, because in what I'm seeing out there is a tremendous interest in optimization of value streams, or value stream management, often called. In fact, our top tier certification, brand new at PMI, is the value stream consultant, based on the work by Al Shalloway. And what we talk about in our value stream consulting certification, so safe program consultant, value stream consultant, same kind of idea. But with the value stream consultants, where safe is kind of hierarchical in terms of portfolios, programs, and teams, they talk about value streams, but that's not the way the framework is set up. And with Flex, which is what our value stream advice is based on, it's much more about flow, horizontal flow rather than top down. So I talk a little bit about that later on in this presentation. So DA is a toolkit. We used to call it a process decision framework because it helps you make better decisions, but people don't like frameworks. And when we thought about it, we thought, you know what, it's not really a framework. Think of it more of as a toolkit of practices and strategies. And I'll give you some examples as we go. I could spend an entire presentation just on our mindset, but you can think of this as a reframing of the Agile Manifesto, a modernization of it, because as much as we all love the Agile Manifesto, clearly some of the principles are a bit outdated, like this idea of delivering software every couple of weeks to a few months. No, not in the DevOps world where companies are delivering stuff every day. So rather than sort of, we did actually have our DA Agile Manifesto, but people got upset that we were messing with the Agile Manifesto. So we kind of framed it into principles, promises, and guidelines. And I don't have time to go through all these, but I'll just talk about a couple that I find quite interesting. In the principles area, delighting customers, obviously, needs to be front and center. But how do you delight customers? Well, you do by being awesome, by adjusting for context. When we bring many different approaches, not one recipe suits all situations, of course. And we're pragmatic, we're agnostic. We recognize that sometimes, by the way, 100% agile approach doesn't make sense. Sometimes a hybrid approach makes sense. And in the Q&A, I could give you many examples where hybrid is better than a pure approach. And we believe that choice is good. So I'll move on to promises. I love our very first one here: create psychological safety and embrace diversity. If you look at the manifesto and its principles, there's no mention of diversity. And of course, diversity makes us stronger and delivers better results and better empathy and those kinds of things. And then we get into the guidelines. A couple that I love are create effective environments that foster joy. So we think about the works of Jürgen Appello, David Marquette, Richard Sheridan, where a lot of times people are stuck in a bad system. It's not the people that are bad, it's the system that's bad. So we need to focus more on improving the system rather than improving individuals. And that's good. But so you change the culture by improving the system is the next guideline. So lots of good stuff here, but I'll move on to some of the other content. You can always go back and see more about this on the website. Now, the purpose of this slide, and we're thinking about maybe redesigning this at PMI just to make it aesthetically a bit more pleasing. But essentially what we're talking about here is I call this the square onion, and it shows the multiple layers of DA. It's not just about IT and DevOps, which is the second layer from the bottom. We have this baseline where the principles, promises, and guidelines I just touched on, basic agile guidance and lean, and even some serial ideas, different types of roles and team structures and ways of working. That's a foundational layer, and you can apply those practices within IT or outside IT. If you go to pmi.org/discipline-agile, I encourage you to spend 10 minutes watching 2 5-minute videos. One of Mike Nettles from Papa John's, he was the COO, CIO at the time. Listen to his 5-minute story about what DA did for Papa John's. And by the way, most of his stories are outside of IT. And then go into off one of the side menus, you can look at a government example of the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia. Listen to Gary Eastwood, again, 5 minutes of your time. Listen to the difference and it's the CIO, what DA did for that organization. When you give people the power of choice and different kinds, like some of the teams are using Scrum-based approaches and some are using lean, continuous delivery. It was so liberating for management not to have to be able to trust the teams to pick an approach to make sense for them, but yet live within sort of a common governance framework of guardrails to make sure that we have some consistency of overall approach and reporting up to executives, because the executives didn't know the difference between Scrum and Lean. So listen to the testimonials. Message here is that we take Agile out into these different areas to help them to be Agile as well. And that's what true business agility means to us, is that, and by the way, the coaches that we have, the Agile coaches typically aren't skilled in talking to finance and marketing and helping them to become Agile as well. And this is what we teach in our coaching certs, is not just what Agile is and the tools and techniques, but also Agile, lean, change management, because that's what this is. This is a change management exercise and typically not really included in your basic Agile training. So we need to supercharge our skills. So this is kind of what I touched on in my introductory remarks, and is that people just these days don't understand what their options are. Very talented, smart people. But in my years of coaching and leading teams, I've seen teams try to figure things out in retrospectives and how to improve. And they kind of just stare at each other and they're waiting for the coach to give them the answer, because they don't know how to do requirements beyond user stories. That's all they've been taught. They don't know the value of aligning terminology using a class diagram as an example, or mind mapping, brainstorming exercises. They haven't been taught. And I think of like a Turkish bazaar where you've got all these ingredients, and these are all wonderful ideas to help you become a better cook. Wonderful ingredients, but I see a sign here for saffron. I know what saffron is. I know it's yellow, make stuff yellow, but I don't know what dishes to use it in. There are lots of ingredients here. I don't even know what they are. So I'm never going to be an executive chef because I haven't learned in what the different practices and strategies are to help me get better. That's kind of what we're talking about here. So let's invest some time to understand the hundreds and hundreds of practices. I think I've got a slide to talk about the different kinds of practices that we have coming up. But this, the Choose Your Wow book, essentially, by the way, folks, is the second edition of our first book, Disciplined Agile Delivery with a sailboat on it. This is like second edition, but we decided to make it a little bit more sexy and call it Choose Your Wow, Choose Your Way of Working. And it's funny, now everybody's talking about choosing your way of working. So it's certainly a popular phrase these days. And then compare it to the Scrum Guide, which is, what is it now, 13 pages. And it's not a criticism of Scrum. Scrum is awesome, but it's 13 pages. And by design, it's not criticism of Ken and Jeff. They didn't try to tell people or try to understand people's context. He said, here's the kernel, stick to the kernel, and then figure out the rest of the stuff yourself. And what we're saying is, yeah, but we need to help people figure out the rest of the stuff. And that's what the toolkit's for. And we talk about things that are not typically talked about in a typical Agile certification. Like on the left-hand side, just because you're Agile doesn't mean that you don't do any release planning or that risk management goes away. My goodness, risk management is as important in Agile projects as it is in traditional, yet in a Scrum course, you don't learn anything about risk management. And so sometimes I see, young Scrum masters running these, critical projects that don't even know the basics of project management. They don't understand that we need to understand our risks, and we need to prioritize them and quantify them and then actively mitigate them. And so bad things happen, and no surprise to me. So risk management is part of the discipline within DA. We have very lightweight, it's not heavyweight, lightweight risk management and governance techniques baked into the toolkit. For multiple life cycles and such. On the right-hand side, you can just sort of see just how much stuff we have available. 53 different types of requirements modeling. Of course, you don't use them all, but you might cherry pick one or two to help you out, to supplement your user stories, to help you be more effective in elaborating requirements with your business to make sure that you understand what you really need. And to organize those practices so that they're easy to find, we have goals. Every project or product has goals, and they're not necessarily technical goals. And this is a good way to organize the practices so it's easy to find them. Like, for instance, we need a team. If you have a team already, good. You don't even need to look at this. But if you're starting a new initiative or new product or something, you've got choices. How big is my team? How many teams do I need? What skills do they need? Are they full-time, part-time? Are they 100% dedicated to this initiative or just being used part-time? Are they consultants? Are they full-time people? Are they co-located? Are they distributed? And I'm just rattling these off the top of my head because I've been doing this stuff for years. But a lot of people need some prompting to help them understand the kinds of things they need to think about. And in which cases, I'll give you a simple example. Okay, we don't have all the people to do it, so we need to outsource. And there are no people in my city that need to do it. So I need to go elsewhere geographically to help to supplement my teams. So geographically distributed, fine. Well, have you thought about whether you want to outsource east-west or north-south? Most people don't even think about that. But if you're doing it north-south, then you're in the same time zone. Everybody can be on the daily meeting every day. I know I would do some work for Panera Bread as an example, and they outsourced to, I forget whether it was Brazil or Venezuela, and everybody was in the same time zone. And they had cameras in both team rooms with the mics on all day. It was like they were co-located. And if you were east-west, that might not be possible. So we make the implicit decisions more explicit so that we're very proactive in providing guidance to the teams. Now, one thing I'll say, it's got phases: inception, construction, and transition. And a lot of Agiles look at this and they go, oh my goodness, I do not like this. This does not look Agile because it's got phases. Agile doesn't have phases. And I would say, fine, if you don't need phases, don't use them. So folks, please don't get hung up on the fact that there's 3 phases here. If you don't need an inception, you don't use it. It's as simple as that. But if I'm starting maybe a 1 or 2 year replatforming of my insurance system off the mainframe, I want to do a little thinking about what this is going to be about. And maybe I'm going to carve off 2, 3, 4 weeks to plan out what this initiative is all about. That's a phase. So it's good. Choice is good. If you want phases, they're there. If you don't need them, don't use them. Simple as that. I'm going to take a look at an example of a goal diagram. Behind each of these goals, we have a goal diagram, and this helps us discover the content. So exploring scope, and they're broken up into different sort of categories of different modeling techniques. Some of them are textural, some of them are diagrammatic. And you see, if we want to explore the usage of a solution that we're building, then yeah, the ones that are bolded, italicized in this box, user stories, story maps, epics, yeah, that's the basics of Agile. And the bold italicized means that they're default. If you want to use a technique in a particular category, these are good ones to start with. But you may want to use other ones to supplement the technique. By the way, if you see an arrow beside the choices, it means that generally speaking, the choices at the top are better than the choices at the bottom. They're a little bit more agile. So it helps you, if you're picking a choice consistently at the bottom of the list, maybe that's a reason you're not being very effective. You're not making very good choices. So for each of these, we have a definition, often a reference for more information. And on the right-hand side, trade-offs to say, in these situations, this is good. In these situations, this might be a better technique. As an example, personas. If you're struggling to create a really good user experience, maybe we should use some personas. And by the way, we're very actively using personas at PMI right now in regards to designing of our certifications and courses. And this, of course, if you know about personas, helps us build empathy with our business, our users, so that we can design a better experience for them. So right away, if you learn about personas, here's another tool in your toolkit that you might wish to bring to your particular solution. So you can think of the goal diagrams as your pantries of ingredients. And people say, well, that's nice. You've got 1,600 practices, Mark. But boy, that sounds complicated. How would I get started? Scrum is so simple. I just want to do Scrum. And that's fine. You can. And I'm going to show you the starter recipes that we have within DA. But first of all, I just want to quickly show you that there's an online version of what I just showed you. And it's starting up here. I actually have another instance open already. I'll open up the instance already have open. But you can see here, you can click on, this is freely available to PMI members. And you can click on the different strategies, and what you see below it is exactly what I was just showing you, the definitions, references, and trade-offs. I was talking about form team. If I click on form team, you can see here all the things I sort of rattled off about size of the team, the skills we need to have. Is it a whole team or a part team? Are they going to stay together long term, like in a product approach? Or is it more of a project team? We bring a vendor in to deliver something and then we release them. These are choices that we might want to make. And there's also additional resources. So you can click on different things and find out more information out on the web. This is where it actually gets better than the version in the book, is because we can link out to references out on the internet. Okay, so I just wanted to show you there's an online version. All right, recipes. Talked about ingredients, the practices and strategies. We have multiple life cycles that you can start with. So Scrum, that is our Agile. We don't call it the Scrum life cycle because yes, it's got time boxes, sprints, but it's more than that. Maybe it's got some technical practices. So it's not just Scrum. We generically refer to it as Agile. But the thing, you see the icon looks like Scrum. It's got these time boxes, 2-week batches, if you will, which is what Scrum is all about. We have an Agile version, a continuous delivery version. We also have lean versions, because sometimes lean is a much better approach than time boxes with Scrum. And we've got a continuous delivery version of that. So Kanban-based approaches. Some of them are more project-based approaches where we have a start, we have an end. But as we know, where we can, we want to use much more of a product approach. So that's where our continuous delivery flavors are more appropriate. So you folks are about agnosticism, pragmatism, and so are we. And about choice. Choice is good. I feel sorry for organizations that say everything must be Scrum. Because it's just not the most effective in all situations. We also have exploratory, very similar to lean startup, and we have a program approach where we've got many teams building one solution. It's kind of the safe pattern, if you will. All right, so the first message was we need to invest in learning. If we learn, and it's, for me, this is one of those things that's just so obvious that better educated teams, and I'm not just talking about the Scrum Masters, of course, it's the entire team. Better educated teams make better choices, they're more successful. It's as simple as that. Shouldn't be a hard sell. So invest in learning. And then the second thing I want to talk about, once you've invested in learning all those ingredients, now you're ready to become a chef. But unfortunately, people are still looking for the simple answer. And sometimes I say to companies, are you following other people or are you leading? Are you creating bespoke solutions? And when I talk to executives, I sometimes ask them these questions. From your perspective in your company, who are the companies that you fear? Who are the ones that you admire? And so if you're a car company and you're Ford, do you admire GM and fear them? Or do you admire and fear Tesla? I think there's an obvious answer there. If you're a bank, do you fear BMO or Citicorp or Barclays? Or do you fear Google, who sells insurance without brick and mortar? And a lot of people admire Spotify, which is great. But what's great about Spotify is not how they do Agile. It's how they customize their approach for themselves, a Swedish online music company. So if you've heard me talk before, sometimes I rant about people who copy Spotify because, by the way, what you see on YouTube about Spotify, they don't do that anymore. Talk to somebody at Spotify. They've moved on. So if you're copying that approach, you're copying a 7 or 8-year-old approach. So don't copy Spotify. You can start with some of their ideas. And by the way, I think some of them are great. The guilds as a COP, I like that term, I use it. But I don't take everything they do and just sort of plop it into an organization. That makes no sense. So I think you sort of get the idea here, just in the interest of moving on. I think you get it that we need to create a way of working that makes sense for us rather than copy somebody else's solution. So how do we improve? How do we optimize based on these techniques? Traditionally, process improvement using retrospectives, we would maybe actually lose productivity initially as we learn a new framework or method, and then we would expect to improve, and we do. But we often usually see teams and orgs level off in terms of their improvements. And it's because they exhaust the limited guidance that the method or framework provides, and they don't know where to go from there. So this is where Disciplined Agile comes in. And so this is classic retrospective based improvement, and that's great, or Kanban, Kaizen. But what we do in Disciplined Agile, because we give you context specific advice to say in these situations, this technique helps you get better, we call this guided continuous improvement. So, that's why I think my video is on. That's why the book's a thick book. There's a lot of stuff in here, but you don't read it every day. You sort of reference it. If you're struggling in requirements or testing, or you're trying to decide if you're going to do estimating, because I say if, some people are estimating is right or wrong. It's not binary, folks. Sometimes estimating is a waste of time. Sometimes it's really important. So if you're going to estimate, well, first of all, you decide if you're going to estimate. And if you are going to estimate, I think we've got 8 different types of estimating. So we help you decide which estimating technique will be most effective for you. This is called guided continuous improvement, or GCI. And the nice thing too to keep in mind is not disruptive. This is the beautiful thing about it. I know you're probably all working either in an organization or helping other organizations, or you're a practitioner yourself. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's improve in place. Start where you are and then evolve. And if that means evolving away from whatever method or framework you're doing, that's okay. Of course, the people who sell you those certifications don't want you to evolve away from Scrum to Lean. They don't want you to evolve away from SAFe to something else. But maybe you don't. But because we're agnostic and pragmatic, just like you, we say if that makes sense, then that's what you do. And this diagram kind of tries to get that point across, is we're kind of the Switzerland. We don't get into the methods wars because there's good in all this stuff, but none of these things work in all situations. That's clear. So we talked about learn, and then being in a position, learn about how to use guided continuous improvement to optimize, choose your own bespoke ways of working. And then now you're in a position to really accelerate value delivery. So just doing a time check here. We're doing good, almost done. It should be obvious that delivery teams don't work in isolation. If you're working in an organization of any significant size, then you're going to have these enterprise groups, and they're there for good reasons. They're like the guardrails and make sure we get some consistency with what we do, that we don't get into trouble like with security leaks and bad architecture and technical debt, and allocating our resources or funding to the appropriate initiatives, value streams, etc. So these things are all good. The problem is many times they're stuck in decades old processes, which are very traditional, linear, time-consuming, bureaucratic, document-focused. And this is one of the key reasons that Agile fails. So I talked about one of the key reasons Agile fails is that teams are simply not skilled enough to make good decisions and to continue to improve. And a second reason is the organization. Remember I said good people are stuck in a bad system. And so let's talk about this. I'm sure you've seen some of these situations where delivery teams are working with finance, and finance says, your funding runs out next month. I need you to create a business plan, business case, a project plan with estimates, have it reviewed by the PMO before I can extend your funding for another 3 months. It's like, good grief, right? But that means my teams will need to stop for several weeks to do this planning. They will be producing no value during this time. Very frustrating, right? How about HR or people management? Team lead says, I urgently need another developer for my team. And HR says, you will need funding approved by finance, a requisition filled out, internally posted for 2 weeks before interviews can start. So the team's going to be without a developer for probably months. And then release management. This is very common. I have 3 new features ready to ship that our customers urgently need. Release management says, these need to be prioritized and approved at our change management committee meeting. They can then be added to our month-end release. Again, good grief, right? When your competitors are delivering using DevOps and continuous delivery, delivering features every day, you're locked into a monthly release cycle, or worse yet, quarterly. And so you get the idea. Data often is a bottleneck, and finance, timesheets. This is a real example from a customer I worked with where I actually helped them get rid of timesheets because they were looking for CapEx, OpEx data for accounting purposes, and I taught them a different way of doing it, which did not require timesheets. So they stopped doing timesheets. And do you think everybody was just a little bit happier in that organization? They were. And this is why I'm so passionate about what we do, because if we do this properly, you spread joy beyond IT to other areas of the organization, like procurement and finance and marketing. And then everybody is happier and it becomes a virtuous cycle. And the organization culture really can change. And this is a differentiator, folks, between DA and the other methods and frameworks out there, is we teach the leaders of the teams, as I said earlier, not just what the tools and techniques are and basic coaching skills, but the coaching skills have to include change management. And how do I negotiate change with your change recipients so that they're on board to try new ways of working? So this is part of what we teach people. And then lastly, in terms of the content, I'll just talk about the value streams. We talked about that and how hot, if you will, that trend is right now. And we show value streams as a loop because it's a continuous loop, and value flows horizontally. And you can think of it like plumbing. And what we do with the value stream consultant is we do diagnostics on the system, find out where the pipes are clogged, and unclog those pipes, thereby improving the flow of value to your customers. So it's wonderful work, and Al Shalloway is the thought leader behind that. Who now works for PMI. So I want to talk as you would expect me to say, what's in it for PMI. We are the Switzerland, and we don't do consulting. We enable consulting partners to do the consulting. Scott and I used to, run a consulting company, but now we rely on people like you to help customers realize these benefits, and starts with learning. So we've got training and certification, as you might expect. And when we redesigned, after being acquired by PMI, we redesigned the certification program, and we did market research. And what we heard from the market is that they were looking for a senior Scrum certification because there's a million CSMs out there. And the hiring managers are saying, I don't want the guy or gal who's 22 years old and has a CSM, but has never actually done anything or never done anything complex or critical. I want somebody who's been around for a while and has done Scrum in complicated, serious situations. And so and I show you an example of an ad that came out I'm speaking to you from Calgary, Alberta, by the way, looking specifically for a senior Scrum Master. So because they get all these resumes from people who are not properly skilled. So we created one of our searches called the DA Senior Scrum Master, and it's relatively new, and we already have 1,200 senior Scrum Masters. That's what people are looking for. And you can see here, I circled it because I thought it was kind of cool that they're actually looking for people who understand the DA toolkit. And of course, I understand why. It makes me happy when I see an ad like that, because the hiring manager understands the value of learning what's in the toolkit. So we have this is our 4 key certifications. We got a DA Scrum Master, and we're struggling with the naming of it because it's actually a practitioner cert, not just a Scrum Master cert. Anybody in the team, as we all know, everybody's responsible for improving the process, not just the Scrum Master. So you learn the toolkit in the DA Scrum Master. In the Senior Scrum Master, you get into more sophisticated sets of teams, managing dependencies, and starting coaching outside the IT teams. And then the DA coach takes that next level, which is like enterprise coaching. It goes far beyond what you normally learn in a coaching cert, because the coach understands what's in the toolkit as well. It's not just a soft skill coaching cert. It's soft skills plus understanding the practices and understanding change management that really makes you an effective coach. And the value stream consultant is the top tier certification for really advanced, overlooking your overall value delivery as a system, improving that system. Okay, so a lot there, a lot to cover in that time. Oh, and we do have time for questions, which is wonderful. I hope this was useful, and really thank you for attending. I think this is actually an ideal audience for people to learn about DA.